Heyo, this is Paleac, and in this video, as you can see and read by the title, we're going to talk about elevation panning and how we can apply different filtering techniques to implicate certain spectral cues that will make sound as if they are above our head or at least higher than normal. It works pretty well in headphones. It also works on normal speakers. It's mono-compatible because you're just applying a filter to the spectrum of the sound. You're not doing any like fancy delays or anything. Before you even watch the video, you're probably wondering, what the fuck does this even sound like? Does it sound even remotely believable? Should I bother watching this guy ramble about the folds of someone's outer ear for the next 40 minutes? There's also a prerequisite video that you should probably watch that goes over like binaural shit and Doppler shift and all of that. So essentially, this is the sound. And now this is supposed to be below you. This is above you. So now we can go like move something above our head. And it sounds very realistic, like something that's kind of above us, but from a distance and then moving across. And then also in the very last like 8 minutes of this video, I'll show off this rack and show a bunch of really interesting and cool sounds that you can create in movements and like dynamic, spatial, stereo, height, diagonal panning, you know, Doppler shift, crazy, all sorts of stuff. If you'd like to have all this, is going to be available on my Patreon. So if you subscribe to my Patreon, it's $15 a month, and then you can get a bunch of different sound effect racks and stuff that I've made in all my YouTube tutorials, and then I'll also give you this. Now, it's been a while since I've uploaded anything, and I feel kind of guilty. So if you've subscribed to my Patreon in the past, then just message me, private message me, either like through email or through Discord or whatever, and I'll just give you all this for free. So yeah, all right, on with the video. It can work pretty well depending on your own personal ear makeup. So if you do a little bit of research into head-related transfer functions and how we localize sound in general as humans, you would know that we all hear very differently in that our ears are structured very differently. So as you look at this little picture here of our pinna, or also called an auricle, all these little grooves and stuff that go around your ear will scatter and reflect sound waves. And by scattering, it adds a bunch of delays, which in effect adds a bunch of comb filters to the sound that ends up going into your ear canal and vibrating against the eardrum or the tympanic membrane. So also, fun fact, so you know how there's like a large resonance at around 2 to 5 kilohertz, and essentially sound really loud around 2 to 5 kilohertz. So you have to be mindful when mixing, and you typically turn sounds down there. The reason why that resonance is there is because your ear canal is effectively a tube, and tubes resonate at frequencies, and happens to be that that's just your tube resonating at about 2 kilohertz. So that's why if you play a sine wave at like 2 kilohertz, it fucking hurts. It's because it's being amplified by the physical makeup of your ear. For some reason, I always thought that it was like something that was happening in your brain, you know, like we evolved to become more sensitive and as like a psychoacoustic phenomena, but no, it's like a physical thing happening, which is pretty cool, I think. So effectively, tiny changes in the ear will result in very different filtering effects, and the angle at which the sound enters your ear will scatter differently and reflect differently and lead to different filtering. So essentially, if you think about how humans localize sound, for the most part, we use like delays and stuff between our left and right ear to localize something that's going around us in a circle, because obviously if it's to the right of us, it's going to hit this ear first, and then it's going to end up hitting this ear about 0.8, 0.7 milliseconds later, right? As it goes around, it also gets filtered a little bit differently. So if something's behind you, you're going to hear it, and it's going to be filtered differently based on how it's, you know, hitting your ears and how your ear shape will amplify certain frequencies and whatnot. Now, it's very unique and different for everyone, so there's no like one works for all behind head filter, but you can kind of approximate with that with different methods, and I have other YouTube videos going over how to do stuff like that and applying like Doppler shift and all of that. Now, approximating heights, luckily, when it comes to approximating height, in most humans, we all hear very similarly in that for most humans, If you look at this little graph here, this is indicative of how most humans' ears work, in that you will, when a sound is in front of you, there's a massive, massive dip, like 20 decibels or something, right at about 8 kilohertz. This happens for most everyone. It's between 8 and 10 kilohertz. It varies a little bit per person. And essentially, when a sound is above you, that dip goes away and it gets boosted a little bit, right? So if you simply filter and boost 8 kilohertz as a sound is meant to move above you, then it'll sound like it rises in effect. And this little peak right here at about 2 to 5 kilohertz, well, would you look at that? It's that resonance I was talking about. That comes from the diameter and length of your ear canal. Now you have to keep in mind, it's not like linear in terms of it like raising in height. It's related to the angle of elevation relative to you. So there's two angles that we're talking about here. There's azimuth, which is the horizontal angle that goes all the way around your head, 360 degrees, and then there's also elevation that goes up. So we can find a cute little drawing here. I think this one is pretty good. The sound as it goes above your head will sound like it's above you. You know, no shit. So if you have, let's say, a sound or an object that is 5 feet above you, but far away, it's not going to sound like it's above you at all, even though it's 5 feet above your head. And as it approaches near you and then goes near and then above you over your head, it's going to increase in the elevation angle. And the way that it increases, presuming that it's approaching you like in a linear straight line, is going to be like a cosine function or a sine function. So we talked about moving things above your head, right, by boosting the pinna filter, but moving things below your head can be a lot more complex. I didn't know how to do it before, but I figured out a couple new principles that you can apply. So I found some cool research papers talking about the effects of your torso when it comes to sound localization. So if you're hearing something from like below you, the sound wave is going to impact and then reflect off of your torso, and certain frequencies will get absorbed and attenuated based on like the shape of your torso and the size of it and the material of your clothes and stuff, I guess. And then it'll go to your ears afterwards. So there's going to be another delay applied over like a filtered region, and that region tends to be between 800 and 3 kilohertz. So that apparently plays a large role in how we localize stuff below us. There's a bunch of other features like it also reflects off of your shoulders in some weird way, but that is a lot harder to like emulate. Also, when something is below us or near the floor, it's going to have there's going to be the bounce off of the floor as well. So if you're like doing a push-up or something and you're breathing through your mouth, as your head goes closer to the floor, you're going to hear comb filtering, which is just the delay from the floor bounce matching and filtering over it, because like as you get closer it gets much smaller. So there's comb filtering constantly. So if you make like a shh sound and then move your hand in front of your mouth, you're gonna hear comb filtering. It's just reflections and stuff. There's delays happening everywhere all the time. Cool stuff. So yeah, if you hear an object that's below you against the floor, you're going to hear it be comb filtered based on the distance of the source of the sound to the floor, as well as the angle that it is relative to you is going to reflect off of your torso in a different way, and also like the way that it is moving, where it's positioned around you in the horizontal plane. Because like if it's hitting me from the side, then the size of my torso, the width of it relative to the wavefront as the sound is propagating is going to be different. So it's all super fucking complicated, and emulating that exactly is going to be like impossible, but we can try to loosely approximate it. All right, I just recorded for like 25 minutes. It was perfect. I got everything done in one take. It was great. I was just going to edit down a couple ums, and then I was done with the video, and then I didn't have the microphone recording. So classic blunder. Now I understand what all the YouTubers feel like when they're like, "Oh, I didn't record with my OBS," and now I've done it. Now I understand their pain. Okay, so fuck. All right, so we are going to build a height filter. So how do we do that? First, we need to create the pinna filter, meaning emulating how the sound sounds when it's above us and how we're boosting 8 kilohertz. So let's go to our frequency bands, go to 8 kilohertz, and then guess what? You can boost it. That's a pinna filter. That's pretty much it. Now we can add an extra band at like, I don't know, let's say like 10 kilohertz, because it fluctuates and varies which ones are being boosted. And then I'm also going to just boost the overall signal on the high end, just because as like a weird psychoacoustic phenomena related to, you know, like the pinna filter and how all these boosts in the high end increase the overall high end. Just blanket boosting all the frequencies is going to help a bit. Everyone's like notch pinna filter is going to be at like slightly different frequencies, so we just boost all of it as well. That's also going to help, right? Now we can just adjust the scale. So as you can see, oh hey, this is when the sound is like in front of you, right? Then when it sounds in front of you, the notch is in effect, and then when it's above you, it actually gets boosted a bit. Isn't that cute? Normally, if you just like want to map scale here, I want to have it set so that when scale is at exactly 0, I want there to actually be a notch like this, because 0 corresponds to it being like level with me in elevation, right? And when it's level, there should be a notch. And then when it's above me, it should get boosted. And then when it's below me, maybe I'll get rid of a few, some extra frequencies, right? So to do that, we can use a multi-map. The multi-map is powerful because then you can apply a curve to knobs, essentially. So normally, look at that. It's going from negative 200 to 200. Let's make it from negative 100 to 100, right? Maybe a little bit more and a little bit less, something like that. Now I can apply this curve such that when this is directly in the middle, when it's basically level with my head, so when this knob is at 50%, that there's going to be this notch here, right? And that is essentially what we see. So perfect, right? So, you know, just do some tweaking until you're happy with it, but you want it so that, you know, when it's above your head, that notch gets removed and then even boosted a bit, which is what we're seeing here. Okay, cool. Now we have our pinna filter. So it sounds like this. This is like below us, and that's above us. It's not very believable, but this is because this is the very first like psychoacoustic effect we're applying. When you start combining effects and start adding more, it becomes more believable. So that's the pinna filter. Now, we can only kind of use this to kind of move things above, right? I want to also be able to hear things more believably below, so we need to add a floor bounce delay. We can call that the pinna filter. Now the floor bounce, if you think about how the floor bounce delay is going to work, when the sound is right against the floor, it's going to have an extremely short delay. You hear comb filtering as it gets closer. So we're going to have a shorter delay when it's right next to the floor, and then the further away from the floor that it is, meaning the higher it is, the longer of a delay there's going to be. And also the volume of the wave being reflected off of the floor is going to get quieter because the distance is increasing from it to the floor. So if you look at the average male height, we have 1.77 meters, right? So if the sound is directly level with me, and then, you know, the sound is played, it goes to my head, and also a reflection wave goes to the floor and then back up to my head, it's traveling 1.77 meters down and 1.77 up, meaning I'm going to be hearing 3.54 meters difference in time based on the speed of sound. So what is that? Well, you take 3.54 and divide that by 343. Look at that, I already did this. And what do we get? We have 10.3 milliseconds. So when it's at head height, there's a 10.3 millisecond delay for the floor bounce. Great. What about when it's way above my head? I don't know. I don't fucking know, because that's not like strictly defined, like how high it is. All that I know is that the volume's going to get quieter and quieter of the floor bounce the further up it goes, so it's going to become less and less relevant. So that shouldn't matter. So I'm just going to set the delay to like 20 or something, right? Like 25 milliseconds. And then have it set so that when it's in the middle, when the elevation is directly in the middle, so that is level with me, I'm going to get about a 10.3 millisecond time delay. So how do I do all that? I use multi-maps. Well, first, there is an issue in that the minimum delay time is 1 millisecond, and I want it to be less than that. I want to have more control. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a group, and then I'm going to split this into 2 channels, and there's going to be like the quote-unquote dry signal that we're not going to be manipulating, which is delayed by 1 millisecond, and then the wet signal. So the difference between these is actually the delay. So if I make this like 1.22 and this one's 1, then the actual difference is 0.22 milliseconds. And then you hear a unique comb filter that you can't normally get. right? And that comb filtering is what what we're looking for. I'm going to automate this, and I'm going to adjust this from 1.22 to, like I said, 25, right? Now also, like I said before, the volume of this reflected wave, we'll call this floor bounce, is going to change the higher up it gets, meaning the larger of a delay that it gets. So we can also map the chain volume here, and the chain volume, when it's like directly against the floor is still going to absorb some of that sound wave. So let's make it like minus, I don't know, -6, right? I want to make the minimum delay time not 1 millisecond exactly, because something annoying about Ableton's delay is like if you move the knob 25% of the way, it's still at 1 millisecond, and then 50% of the way it's at 1.8, and then 100% of the way it's at 25. So it's not linear at all, and a bunch of the knob space is taken up by this like 1 millisecond range. So if I make this range between like 1.05, which is fair because I'm like, the sound isn't going to be literally fucking smushed into the floor, or like, you know, 1.1 or something, then now it's a little bit more linear. And then we can start using this multi-map and apply a curve to try to make it even more linear. So let's do that. So we have this applied here. So I want this to be, what did I say before? I want this to be 10.3 milliseconds when it's level with my head, meaning 50% of the way. So, and I also have to consider there's a 1 millisecond subtraction from this time from the real actual delay time that's going, right? So let's go for 11.3, and let's do that by adjusting the curve. And then you can also adjust what the maximum delay is. Like I said, it was going to be 25 earlier. But I don't want this curve amount to be too big, because then, like, look, I move it 1% and then it's jumped 1.2 milliseconds. And that's too much for me, right? So if I want to have less, just like a little bit of a curve, but I still want this to be at 11.3, I can just increase this time over here. And then now this is much smoother. Now we can also apply the multi-map to the chain volume and have this set so that when it's closest to the ground, it's at full volume, meaning -6, because some of it gets absorbed. And then all the way it's gone. Right? So now we have the floor bounce. So I'll just name this floor bounce. Cool. And now we need to create the chest bounce or the torso bounce, right? So to fully understand what delay times we're going to be going for, we need to understand what is the distance between our ears and our chest, or like the center of mass of our chest. I already did the math. It's 1 millisecond, all right? Average height of the torso and the average height of the ear, and then, you know, subtracted the two. And then divided that by the speed of sound, and then you get 1 millisecond, like almost exactly. Now, if you think about, let's say the sound is coming from directly below you, right? Then it's going to travel up through your chest and then to your ear, meaning the wave that's bouncing off of your chest, because like this is hypothetical, is going to hit your ear at the exact same time as the original signal. If the sound is directly above your head, it's going to come down, hit your ear, and then it's going to travel down, hit your chest, and then bounce off and travel back up and hit your ear, meaning it's going to be 1 millisecond times 2, because it's going both ways. So when it's below us, we're going to approach no delay, and then when it's above us, there's going to be some delay. Now, it's never going to actually hit no delay, because you're not going to ever hear the sound from directly below you and have it go through your chest. It doesn't really make sense, but we can get pretty close to that. So with this delay, we're going to do exact same thing as before. Duplicate this chain, and then I'll call this the dry signal. And then this guy, we can take U, and then this guy is going to go from 1 millisecond, which is 0, to 3 milliseconds, right? And then, like I said before, it's not ever going to actually be directly below you. It's going to be at some angle, and based on the angle, we're going to be adjusting where it is, because this is all dependent on the angle to your chest and your ear, right? If it's right in front of you, then it's going to come and hit your ear, and then at whatever slight angle variation, it's then going to hit your chest and then bounce off and hit your ear, and depending on what the angle variation is, yada yada yada. So let's try to make this linear. So to begin with, this is not going to ever hit 0. We're going to set this like, I don't know, like 1.3 or something. And then we can also map this to this. Which I would say this is already pretty good. This is already pretty linear. I just want it to be like when it's right in front, let's make it take just about 1 millisecond. And then also from what I read on the research paper, the chest bounce is going to be reflecting frequencies between like 800, 700 or so, and 3 kilohertz. So I'm going to take an EQ8 and then put that behind this little chest bounce delay thing, and then set this to, yeah, like right there. And then we can set this guy something like that, right? This is 3 kilohertz right here. And then it's also going to be much quieter because it's bouncing off of your chest and being absorbed and stuff. All right, so let's just name this. So this is our torso bounce. We can just make this look like one knob to make this a little bit easier on the eyes. We can then map the input from our multi-map here, and we name this height filter, right? So our sound, this is like below us. That's above us. I find it a little bit more believable when it's like panned to only one ear a little bit. Right? So again, this is using full frequency spectrum noise. And also the only thing we're changing is the elevation angle filter. If you're going to hear an object actually like move and drop down by your head or something, you're going to be hearing way more spectral cues than just this. So like, let's say for instance, the sound is like a couple feet above our head and it's going to be moving sideways, right? So let's automate what that might look like. So we'd have, if it's all the way to the right and then pans all the way to the left, right? It's also gonna increase in volume. It's gonna start off pretty quiet, and then it's gonna approach to its maximum volume and then fade off into the distance again, right? And then as it does that, as I described before, as it gets closer and closer, the elevation angle is going to increase because it's actually, you know, it's above our head. So if you automate this as well, you know, starts off neutral, comes up like that, goes back down to neutral. Let's do more. Sounds a lot more believable if we add like a little bit of reverb. And you add, and then even if we add some delay and create a Doppler shift effect. So I like to do this often by just taking a delay, 100% dry wet, no feedback, and then the natural repitching of the delay creates a Doppler shift, right? Now let's try it with something else that isn't like white noise. So and then if you want to, let's say you have something right next to your ear and you want to pan it from below all the way up so it climbs up, right? We can do that as well. So this starts off below and then it pans, let's say it goes all the way up pretty quickly. And then what you're gonna hear is as it goes and passes by your ear, it's gonna become at its loudest and it's gonna get quieter. So we can do something like this. Let's turn off the delay. Yeah. That's, to me, that's very clearly like traveling upwards. And then if you also are panning it at the same time, you get some really cool diagonal movement, right? As you may have noticed, it's kind of a pain in the ass to automate all of these different localization cues together to get like a convincing experience. So that is why I created this giant fucking crazy rack over here. So yeah, essentially this is a combination of like every one of my like sound localization tutorial like techniques all combined into one. Essentially we have binaural panning combined with filtering for when something's behind and in front. We have Doppler shift applied to how fast something is going. And then I've also added this height pinna filter, which is pretty much the same thing. This is pretty much exactly what I just showcased in the video. Maybe a couple of the delay times are slightly off. All this is just approximating stuff in general. I had essentially 4 variables that I had to control. There was the X angle, which controls left and right panning. I had the Y angle, which is the basically azimuth but the Y-axis component to control what's behind or in front, and then also the elevation angle. And then I also had distance. And I still would have to automate those 4 parameters together. And that's still completely, I believe this is like the max level that you can do just using Ableton without using Max for Live. So I created a Max for Live device that converts X, Y, and Z coordinates into X angle, Y angle, elevation angle, and distance. So it finds the Euclidean distance between all these coordinates and the listener position and sends it to distance. And that way you can just start automating just the location or the position of something, and then all of that gets computed into angles and then twists all the knobs in all these racks, basically. So this thing here is just really a UI, an interface. So I'll just give a couple examples of how this works. This little 2D map is actually representing a 3-dimensional space. So the more I increase the Z-axis, the larger this dot gets. And then if it gets too high up, it becomes opaque. Likewise, if it travels too far outside of this circle, then it also becomes, or not opaque, the opposite of opaque, see-through. So essentially this circle here is like what you can hear, and this is actually a sphere, not really a circle, and this is the whole space in which it could exist in, right? So if this is like a little bit above, sounds like it's above. And if it's below, I do have to say, like, it being below is a little bit harder to locate. But then that movement, the movement from between below and above, I think can be really cool. So there's Doppler shift also applied, right? And you can adjust the amount of Doppler shift you want. So if you max this out, and as you can see, you can move this around with your mouse as well. What's cool is this sounds like scratching also, and if you think about it, the actual like mathematics behind the sound of scratching, which is you repitching or changing the speed or playback of the vinyl record, which thus changes the speed of sound that's going through the transducer, the speaker, which changes the pitch. That's mathematically the exact same thing as Doppler shift, in that the speed of sounds hitting your eardrum are changed by the relative speed of the emitting source to you. Mathematically, they're pretty much the same. When someone's scratching, they're just like bending and changing and altering time itself, which is kind of trippy and interesting to think about. Anyways, you can enable and disable it. When Doppler shift is enabled, there's going to be inherent delay added because I'm using delays to do the Doppler shift. And then you can also enable and disable the ITD, which is the interaural time difference, meaning binaural. Right, so with it on, it sounds way cooler in headphones, I have to admit, but then there's going to be comb filtering issues when you convert it to mono. Whenever you're using binaural sound, you have to consider what you're taking away when it's converted into mono. For like some ear candy and stuff, it takes away hardly anything and it's totally worth it. Right? There's also this reverb send. So within this rack, there is a reverb that I'm just using stock reverb for the basic rack, but you can replace it with any reverb of your choice. So it's all the way at the end of this Doppler shift rack. You just open up the second chain, replace this reverb with reverb of your choice, and then it'll all be fine. There's different delays applied before the reverb depending on the distance to you. So the reverb is also used as a localization cue. And also, like, the further away the object is, the more of the reverb you hear, because when an object is far away, you hear more of the room than the sound itself. There's this hard pan curve thing, which changes how much hard panning gets applied when the object is near you. So if like a mosquito comes right by your ear, you're going to hear almost all the sound pan to the right. But if you're hearing like a truck from far away, the actual amplitude difference is pretty much the same. You're actually localizing it based on timing differences. So you can just adjust what the ratio is of how close something has to be for it to turn into hard panning versus it just being like time difference panning and filter panning, you know? So like here it's hard panning, which doesn't sound nearly as cool. But if we adjust it so that there's only a little bit of hard panning was really close, sounds way cooler. And then also something that I have been having fun with is using like modulation to control the locations. So I like to use spellbook for one. So like the spellbook, if I set this to turn off read mode and just have it spin like this, right? Then I can assign the x-axis to the z-axis. And then I can assign the y-axis to the x-axis, right? And then just lower the range of both of these. And now it's going to be moving in a circle. Pretty cool. And then if I make it so that the x-axis is off-center, you get really cool depth of the sound that you can't normally get, especially with that Doppler shift added for when it's sweeping by your face, right? Now for like an actual song, maybe you'd want less Doppler shift, but you know, put sounds in here. Put like gurgly weird synths and stuff like that like go by and fly by your ears and shit. And you can also put this on, you know, different axes and stuff like that. Yeah, really cool depth. Also, this R knob changes the size of the space itself. So if it's cranked all the way, then you're not going to really hear it get far away from you. And then finally, also the smoothing knob, just like it smooths out. If you want to like comb through this with your mouse, you're going to hear some artifacts and stuff like that based on like the mouse movement sending signal through max MSP. So adding some smoothing prevents that. That's pretty much it. So that's the device. It's available on Patreon. You can subscribe to my Patreon for $15. Otherwise, you can build pretty much all of this yourself, with the exception of, I guess, this cute little UI thing. And I know there exists some other external third-party plugins and stuff that can do, you know, like spatial 3D panning, and like they apply their own filters and stuff like that for panning stuff above your head. But for one, I think it's super cool to be able to do all of this with pretty much just native Ableton effects, just delays and EQs. Figuring all of that out is super cool and has like completely changed the way that I perceive and understand the world around me through sound. It's fucking awesome, and I feel like this is like the best way to get a strong understanding of all of it. And two, to my knowledge, I don't know of any third-party plugins that also do like Doppler shift as well, and like you can also apply your own reverb and everything. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be pretty cool if this device is kind of unique in the aspect of how it conjoins all these different spatial aspects together. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of this. I've been like slowly building and creating all the knowledge and building this rack for probably like the past like 2 years, and just like slowly adding more and more features and making it more in depth and stuff. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked on this. I think all the ability to create all of this yourself, I think, is all available on my YouTube channel if you want to explore and figure that out yourself. It's going to be pretty time consuming. Well, less time consuming for you because I just explained everything and did all the research for you. And I think that would be the greatest way to learn more about psychoacoustics and the way that you hear, and then also like dipping your toes into like max MSP and stuff. So like if you want to like, here, I'll just show the the patch works. So if you want to like go about creating your own UI for this, for one, try looking for like other UI plugins that have like an XY controller or something like that you can use your mouse, and then you can just like take the basic patch and then reroute it. But essentially, all that this is that there are these three X, Y, and Z knobs, and then they end up going into this sub patch, the PXYZ to spherical. I know this is a clusterfuck because I'm not good at Macs. You can make yours more pretty than mine, I'm sure. And all that this is just some like basic geometry calculations, just like trigonometry, stuff like that. So like right here, I'm calculating Euclidean distance for the three variables. This is f1, x squared, power of f1 plus y squared plus z squared, and I'm taking the square root of all of that. And then that is the distance. That's the biggest part, honestly, of this entire thing, was just converting, being able to turn coordinates into relative distance to the listener, so that when you move the coordinates, depending on the speed at which you're moving it, changes how fast the distance is moving, which changes the Doppler shift. I think that's like the main thing. And then the rest is just like some tangent functions to extract the different angles and stuff for the knobs. And then all that goes into these super hacky little mapping buttons, right? So all that this is these four buttons are just mapped to different stuff. And then these three knobs change what these buttons are mapped to. All of this itself is just a UI. You could theoretically just map these to like synthesizer parameters, and then by moving this around, it's going to change the angles, which changes the parameters or something. So, I mean, if you want to dive into Max MSP and figure out patching something like this yourself, do it. Or you could subscribe on Patreon, and then you could download this and then dissect it all yourself, and then dig through that, and then try to recreate it, or what have you. And obviously, this device isn't necessary at all. You could just have a height filter and then just like do some manual automation like I described before. So, you create some sound design, you have some like weird alien laughing squelchy thing you want it to just like move over your head. You could just easily do that with just the height filter that we just created. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned something. Yeah, take care.